Today, the 7th of August 2023, Wargaming finally wrote history. Because today we get the first draft of changes going to the super test, showcasing the 279 and Chieftain nerfs, as well as a bunch of other buffs and nerfs we are going to discuss a little bit later. My name is RagingRaptor and I welcome you. We got a tightly packed program today because we have to discuss this and this very thoroughly. Or well, decently thoroughly. Now, finally Wargaming decided to nerf those tanks after having listened to us people countless times that it's boring to play Clan Wars anymore because it's literally only 279 and goddamn Chieftain. That was the problem. And it's also a problem because both those tanks are either hidden behind a grind wall or the other one is simply not available anymore, meaning that there is a massive discrepancy between newer players which want to become competitive towards players which don't have any view or already are competitive because they have those tanks. Also, one more thing right now about the Chieftain 279 changes. I am looking at them in a purely competitive perspective. In random battles, I don't really see them that often, so I don't really care that much. Yes, you sometimes get those games where you have a Chieftain of 279 which is completely omega lolling your team, but usually it doesn't really happen that often. And I do believe that those tanks are much worse in a competitive environment. So let's start with the Chieftain. Wargaming decided to basically remove a turbocharger from the tank, remove its hull traverse speed, give it quite a decent DPM nerf as well as premium round nerf. I don't care about the premium rounds. It's whatever. We don't talk about this. But the speed nerf is rather huge, because currently the Chieftain with the experimental turbocharger or the bond turbocharger can go 52 kph. And that is speedy. That is very speedy. Obviously after the nerf it will only be able to go 46 kph. And this is quite a big difference because currently in a competitive scene you are taking a Chieftain because it is almost as fast as the fastest heavies and it's almost as fast as most mediums, making it a very versatile and insanely powerful main battle tank. And this is why this speed nerf is actually fairly huge, because now it shifts once again the meta towards either mediums or proper heaviums like the 260, WZ11111115A and the 277. The next up is also the DPM nerf, because if we compare those two tanks, the 277 and the Chieftain, currently in a base configuration, the Chieftain has 150 DPM roughly more. After the changes, the DPM will be 150 less. The Chieftain basically loses 300 DPM. That is actually quite big, because not only are you now 15 kph slower compared to a 277, you also have 150 DPM less, with arguably worse premium rounds. This now leads, in my opinion, to the changes in the competitive scene that if you really want to hold a position with a hold down tank, you either take an E3 or a Super Conqueror rather than a Chieftain. Because a Super Conqueror has massively more DPM, it is still fairly quick with a turbocharger, and yes, while it has a weaker turret, the much better DPM and the better premium rounds are going to make up for the lack of turret armor. And E3 is just an E3 when it's all down, like bro. Or even a Batcher. No. And if you want to have a quick engagement, a quick game, you either take full mediums like CS63s, 907s, maybe even Centurion, but you most likely will take heavy tanks, which are the 277, 5A, and the 260. All of them are very fast, have decent armor, have good guns with good DPM. This is rather big. And on the other spectrum now, we're going to talk about the 279 nerfs. It loses hit points, it loses DPM, it loses also 5 kph top speed, and it loses 20mm of premium rounds. All of them, I think, are pretty good buffs, because nerfs. Both of those nerfs are actually huge in the sense of A, it doesn't make the tank unplayable to play like a Kranvan did after they nerfed its accuracy, but it still makes it more balanced to play against. The biggest change in my opinion is the speed buff and the shell penetration buff on the 279, because obviously you currently in the CV Clan Wars meta, it is rotations. You take 279s to push over a flank with sheer amounts of force because you have fun armor, you have fun DPM, blah blah blah. And usually you're fighting 279s versus 279s. Himmelstoff Rails or Fisherman's Bay Middle. Those are typical 279 situations. Let's now take the 279 on the left has the old 340mm of pen, and the 279 on the right has now the new 320mm of pen. In a hold down scenario, nothing really changes. Really, you can still see the cupolas are the main weak spots and the lower plate, but lower plate, whatever. But if you start to go into a straight section, you can start seeing we are now at, what is it? 57.1. You can see there is quite a big difference between what it used to look and what it will look afterwards when it comes to how easy you can penetrate the 279. And as you can see, this makes it quite a lot trickier to play and play against. I do believe that this might come to the conclusion that some players will stop using 279s in city maps and might even go for tanks like the VK7501K due to it having 350mm of heat penetration. It was already being used here and there against E3s on maps like Ensk, but then again, it is a very rare tank. And now if we take, for example, the E3, you can see at least when we go into a normal position, let's do it like this, you can see that nothing really changes. It's still both very green. But as soon as we start going into straight on, you can see that the lower plate on the left side, where we have the 340mm of pen, is a lot greener than on the right side. And if we go a little bit down, because usually a little bit higher, you can see it will be a lot harder for you as a 279 to penetrate the E3. So this is all about those reward vehicle nerfs. I like them because it might finally make that change that Clan Wars is going to need, or even advances, you know? That finally we're not seeing only chieftain spam and there's a lot bigger focus again on 277 and 260s. Because I doubt there will be a massive change towards heavily armored vehicles again, like an E100 or mouse meta. We're not going to see that. But I believe we'll be seeing a lot more of speed metas with 260s, 277, 907s, CS63s, and Centurions maybe even, or STB1s, something like that. Very interesting to see. I'm glad they're getting a nerf, and I'm also glad they're not nerfing gun handling, because this is the most frustrating one. Enough of that. Next up, we have the WZ114G FT, which gets a little bit of HP buff, horsepower buff, a little bit of top speed buff. We take those. It's nice, especially the shell velocity, because that one is really, really slow. Epic 268 version 4 nerf. Massive cut in top speed, massive cut, in my opinion, in HP per ton ratio, and it also loses its weak spot. Well, not loses, but it gains a weak spot. You know, it loses 20mm. That's pretty stout. And it gains a little bit of hold traverse speed. Interesting. I heard this tank was hated in the 7v7 mode. I guess that's what's going to change that. And it's actually pretty interesting to see that they changed those things, and it makes probably this tank to fight a lot more convenient. Huge buffers, in my opinion, to the SD2. Yes, turret traverse is whatever, but it now gets, instead of 330mm of turret phase, 350. That makes it almost immune to most premium rounds. That is actually pretty pog. It also gains DPM. By the way, it has better DPM stock, at least, than the Object 279. It has 2 guns. But obviously the armor is not as good, especially on the cupola. The cupola is massive on the SD2. But it means that if you can hide the cupola, you actually have a pretty decent tank. And you get a nerf to the VZ55. It now has 2.5 second interclip, 25 second reload, and 3 seconds aim time. I believe Wargaming shouldn't have done the reload time between shots to 2.5 but to 3 seconds. That would have been a little bit better, I think. And kept the aim time, in my opinion. But that's... I like it. This thing is annoying. It's very frustrating with its 490 alpha. And it's insanely 2 second reload. So I think maybe 2.5 it would be nice for the tier 9 and for this one 3. It's good to see that there are nerfs. We also got buffs for the AMX65T, so I guess you can be ready for it to get nerfed yet again, sooner or later. But yeah, it is going to get apparently effective armor on the upper glacis plate and slopes. I assume it will be this and this, but I'm not entirely sure because I really don't know how Wargaming is calculating these effective armor angles in whatever sense. But I guess it will be this and this. Okay, I guess. It also gets better view range, which is neat, better DPM, and a little bit more pen. That's neat. Still, I think the biggest issue on this tank is the gun handling. The VKA gets some massive buffs. Look at these, man. Look at these. It gets upper glacis plate buff, it gets turret buffs, it gets more HP, it gets better aim time, better DPM, quite a lot better DPM. That is going to be very, 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 very nutty. Although, does this thing really have such a bad turret stock? I never really played this tank. It's one of the few tanks which I never grinded through because back in the days, it was so bad that everybody said, do not play it. It's absolutely the worst. It's so frustrating to play. Just skip it. And I did that. I skipped it. And it looked like we are going to get a massive buff. Because yes, this is 185. And it's going to go all the way up to 260. And those cheeks go to 120 millimeters. Jeez. That is pretty powerful for a tank, in my personal opinion. That looks good. Do be curious. This one has 160, okay. I was just like, wait, that makes no sense if this would also be 100. Never mind. Huge buffs for this thing. And we go back to almost pre-nerf T69 gold pen, which was 300. Now it's 280. But I do like, not the DPM buff. That's okay, that's whatever. But I like the accuracy buffs. Or gun handling buffs. Those are top notch. I enjoy these. Pershing, accuracy and pen buff and DPM. Bulldog also gets pen and accuracy buffs and a little bit of DPM. We take those. 8015 gets a pretty chunky buff with more speed, more gun handling, quite a lot better gun handling actually. And a buff to this spot in the middle, which was only 127, it's now 227. And the 110 gets a little bit of buff. Lower glacis plate, we take those, and a little bit of gun handling buff. Quite a lot of DPM though. We take those. Churchill, gun handling buff. It's whatever. This is pretty big. Top speed buff, gun handling buff. And the Black Prince gets also the top speed buff to 25 kph, but decent DPM buff and massive gun handling buff. Like from 0.2 to 0.1, we basically halve its circle during turret traverse. That is very, 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 very good. Will be interesting to see how the Black Prince performs. And the Amex AC MLE 46 gets armor and accuracy buffs. Lastly, we have premiums. I don't get why the Patriot gets a buff, because that thing is already, in my opinion, very strong. Maybe I'm coping, but I've considered it to be very strong. And now it gets even stronger. It gets a massive accuracy buff on the turret traverse and hull traverse. It gets better accuracy, it gets better hull traverse, and it gets better aim time, like bro. And add to that, better mobility. Yikes. I don't know, I'm not liking this. But this buff right here, that one is Gucci. We get gun handling buff, view range buff, aim time buff, and more gun handling buff. This is basically everything which the AMX M4 MLE needs, because its gun handling is atrocious and its view range is shite. But now, you still have the big cupola as a weak spot, 60mm, annoying against BZs, but it will feel a lot more competitive. Pilot gets pen buffs and speed buffs, I guess, on the shells, that's okay. Centurion as well as the Stridswagen S1 get the same dispersion now. Stridswagen is being the better winner because it gets better a little bit more. The FV also gets an accuracy buff on the move, as well as view range and DPM, and lastly the Turtle gets a chunky buff. Better accuracy, better pen, a lot better shell velocity, which is a big annoying thing on the Turtle, and more top speed. And with that, we have everything through. Yes, I went quickly on these buffs, because there's no point for me to talk 35 minutes for that. You can ask me in streams if you want to. But I like the changes they're doing. I'm not entirely sure about the Patriot buffs, to be honest. They look a lot. And I'm not entirely sure if this is enough. But I do think Wargaming is on the right step. And I'm absolutely glad Wargaming finally nerfed the 279 and the Chieftain. I'm still a little bit miffed that they didn't introduce new weak spots, in my opinion, but I guess it makes a little bit more sense because now, at least from my gut feeling, and my gut is quite big at the moment, I would say the Chieftain is definitely not a tank anymore, which is a must-have for competitive because of its nerfs it just got. Because the DPM nerf is massive with the speed nerf. There we go. In any case, let me know in the comment section below what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry that I have not done a lot of videos. Thanks to my diploma, which I just got, and my new job, I have been caught up quite a bit. A video about that will be watching soon. And also don't forget to watch my video about the F4X. Cheers and goodbye.